So hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar titled The VFX Behind Unstoppable, Bringing a Champion's Resilience to Screen. I'm Kelly from the marketing team here at Autodesk, and I will be your host today. Now, I am so excited to bring out the talented team behind Amazon MGM Studios and Artist Equity's Unstoppable. They're here to give us a behind-the-scenes look at the film's incredible VFX. So without further ado, let's get started. Please welcome to the stage the team at Artist Equity, Crafty, Apes, and Gneiss Stuff.
Hey everyone.
Good
Just to
morning.
kick us off here, my name is Petra McElveny. I was the visual effects producer on Unstoppable from Artist Equity. And just to kind of kick it off before diving into the visual effects, for those of you that may not know, Unstoppable is the true and inspiring story of Anthony Robles, an athlete who, despite being born with only one leg, went on to become an NCAA national wrestling champion and a Nike-sponsored athlete. This film is a beautiful journey of how he got onto that path and how he faced multiple personal hardships along the way. We had over 800 shots on this show, spanning from crowds and stadium extensions and way too many cloth sims, but all in good fun. And before I kick it over to the experts over here, I think we have a trailer to show you.
I'm running out of time to be someone.
Dreamers are only as big as the dreams they chase. You can show them anything is possible.
He's a man now, right? So you got to pitch in.
I'm not letting him quit wrestling, and I'm not letting him quit school.
Mom, it's just a sport. Doesn't put food on the table.
Wrestling is what you do, it's who you are.
We can't choose when to be great. We can only hope to be great when it counts.
You make people believe in something. You are unstoppable.
You're gonna win.
We'll see. I'll tell you a secret I've been hiding. I only got one leg.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to throw it over to Thomas, who was our on-set supervisor, boots on the ground throughout this process for principal photography. And Thomas will dive into his experiences and any challenges he faced on set and give us his expertise on how everything started.
Thank you, Petra. Hey, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So Petra has already mentioned it. My name is Thomas. I was basically the first responder from the visual effects point of view on this project. And I wanted to take you back to where this all started for the visual effects team, basically to the pre-production phase, and to our first impressions and how we figured out our approach to the challenges of this project. And as you can imagine, these challenges are plenty, since we are dealing with a one-legged wrestling superstar. So I'm going to share my screen for a little presentation. Visual effects of Unstoppable, and of course, wanted to take you back to what really was the start for the visual effects team, that is the prep and rehearsal stage during pre-production of the film. For most of us, what I'm about to show you was really the first introduction to Anthony Robles, and more specifically to his sport, even Greco-Roman wrestling. As well as, of course, his very unique ability. And while Unstoppable is a biographical drama, it's also a hell of a sports movie. So we spent a lot of time with Anthony on the mat, and as we follow his wrestling career, especially during all those pivotal tournaments in his life, even in ever bigger venues, and in front of bigger and bigger crowds, which will become a topic for visual effects. William Goldenberg, our director, he wanted to be very true to life in his world building. So in this next clip, in particular, this really was the initial introduction, which is the edited sports coverage of Anthony's 2011 NCAA championship title match. And this particular clip, was very informative in that regard, as far as the world that we would encounter during the tournaments. And of course, it also gave us a glimpse into the tasks ahead. I'm gonna play this clip for you. It has I'm gonna mute the audio here on this side. So we're getting introduced again. Here is Anthony Robles in his 2011 glory. I don't know that he would have thought himself that only 12 years later his biography would end up would be turned into a movie. But here he is talking about going into this match that is basically the culmination of his wrestling career. Yeah. As you can see here, all these aspects, Anthony has essentially spent most of his life on crutches. So this is a very important aspect for us to understand the motion and what all comes with that. But more importantly, of course, what is happening here on the mat, his unique style, his moves, what he's focusing on, what he puts the emphasis on, where his physicality is really lies during these fights. And you can see already, if you have a little bit of an idea, trying to recreate this with an actor who has 2 legs, of course, will give completely, from the imprints that this leaves on the mats to the way you move, all of this will be challenging. All of this will be challenging to recreate based on Anthony's unique physique in a believable manner. But of course, ultimately he wins this, to a roaring crowd, and this is a scene that's very faithfully represented in the movie as well. From here we go to the prep stage, and where we spent many months, especially Jarrell Jerome, our star, the lead actor who is portraying Anthony Robles in the film, spent many months there, motion training and learning wrestling, basically. But one of the unique aspects for the visual effects team was that we actually have access to the real Anthony Robles here on the wrestling stage, on the demo stage, giving a demo for our director of photography, Sal Totino. So this can't be emphasized enough. Anthony was actually able to essentially double himself in certain scenes, which allowed the director to film most wrestling scenes twice. Once with Anthony himself, and then for another pass with Jarrell. And it of course informs our approach to how we solve creating Anthony, creating the character Anthony for the movie. Interesting here to see also, if you watch what Sal is doing, of course, this being a drama, this goes far beyond the normal sports broadcasting. So the camera here is on the mat with the athletes all the time. It's low angle, and that means not only are we seeing everything in high detail, very close up, that also means that due to the use of wide angle lenses, we see the whole world behind them. We will see through all the venues throughout, we will see all the crowd very in more detail than would be good for visual effects most of the time. And again, this will become a subject for visual effects. Here, during the pre-production, we tested several approaches, because having Anthony there meant that we, by replacing his face with Jarrell's face, we would be able to make scenes with Anthony filmed with Anthony usable. So we did test a bit of a facial marker setup during the testing phase, but ultimately we went with a no markers throughout. Just found this interesting. Here on the left side is Jarrell now. He's joining us again for testing. We see a side by side, both of them walking on crutches. You can see that little makeshift mark. I hate to call it a setup, but just throwing a few markers on Jarrell, also for testing purposes, to see if we could make use of this, as we were going to replace basically his body from the hip on. the hip on downwards with a CG version of himself and Anthony. So ultimately, again, here also we went with a markerless approach, but during testing we had both of this. We had both of this in there. And of course, Jarrell also does his own wrestling, and in a very specific way, which was we worked on this for quite some time, and he was an extremely good sport, no pun intended. During this, as you can see, he's trying to keep his right leg extended. So what this does is it prevents him from putting weight on his right leg, which of course is not supposed to be there. It also helps us a little bit in visual effects, to recreate the area that would otherwise be occluded by his leg. Again, it helps a little bit. This is more to make the action more plausible and to have the correct physics as we go into these fights, and weight distribution essentially. Jarrell worked on this for months. This is from very early days. Still, he became a highly qualified wrestler and is probably a pretty scary opponent on the mat at this point in time. And after testing on this, we settled on two main approaches. One would be we would be doing a CGI leg replacement for shots with Jarrell in frame, and the second approach, and very important, we brought in our machine learning team at Crafty, and we had a machine learning based face replacement for non-acting shots with Anthony, also for wrestling shots and non-acting shots. And to inform you a little bit more about these two approaches, I'm handing it over to Landon now, who's going to play us a clip with a few before and afters.
Thanks, Thomas. I know, Thomas, I think Petra was sending you a message you might not have heard, but a couple more things I wanted to add, Thomas, I hope you can hear me here, is that when Thomas was sharing that first clip, if you guys can notice, the style of the camera work, even some of the movements, like it was almost inspired the director of where he needed to go. As you can see, if you haven't seen the movie, you'll see that some of the shots almost looked like they were taken from that original clip that Thomas shared, like the sweeping camera moves, the style of wrestling, like we were down and tight there. And a lot of that, I think another thing I wanted to mention, Thomas, is that like seeing that clip and where now and then where the film ended up, it's almost like Billy was like copying and pasting some of those shots specifically. Yeah, so that's something that I wanted to share as well. And I think, Thomas, great job in highlighting how much sort of non-visual effects was involved in the pre-production of just like, hey, we got to figure out how to sort of move and walk together and that sort of thing. So because so much of that helps build upon the performance. I think you would agree, right? Like visual effects very much plays a supportive role. We play a huge supportive role in some cases, and in this particular case, it was very important. But all of that foundation was so important, and it was cool how open Billy and I apologize. I don't want to say it wrong, but Thomas, help remind me the DOP's name, Salvatore. But anyways, the involvement with camera and directorial and all of that tied in with what Thomas was envisioning was very integral. So I'm going to play sort of a general breakdown of some of the stuff that Thomas talked about. And then we're going to get into some more with Julian into some of the specifics. I think that's what our plan was, right, Petra? Yeah. Okay.
Got it.
I'm going to share screen. I might do a little bit of talking over it because there is a voiceover that we're not going to be sharing this morning. But again, this is just showing off a bit more of the actual nuts and bolts of what was involved. Yeah, this is what we would refer to. I mean, I imagine most people here on this webinar have seen visual effects breakdowns before, but this is just trying to show you and the viewer, where we started and what was involved and sort of the layering process. Julian will probably get into some of the more nitty gritty stuff because obviously we're going by this pretty quickly. But again, the methodology that sort of Thomas set up and the filmmakers sort of agreed upon or agreed to help execute, it's important to understand that that was like, you know, taken through the entire process. As visual effects artists, supervisors, data wranglers, animators, I mean, we encounter problems all the time. And at the end of the day, we sometimes we refer to as fixers. You know, we fix shots, we fix issues. So, you know, at best laid plans are not always executed perfectly, but that's why you plan for the unplannable. You try to understand what you're executing on and what the overall goal is, and then, you know, you build upon it. So what's cool about being able to share this kind of stuff is that, you know, seeing those clips that Thomas shared from the beginning, it almost seems like an insurmountable amount of work. But then, you know, when you break it down into steps and process, and it's like, okay, what do we need for this particular sequence? What do we need? You know, how are we going to be capturing the lighting? How are we going to be affecting the crowds? You know, how are we going to be affecting the face? And you can see that what I think is pretty cool about this project is the director Billy's ability to help. He could see past. He could see what Thomas was, you know, saying. This is what we need to do here, and this is where we're going to end up. And there was a sort of an understanding to the methodology from everybody. And you know, maybe not a complete buy-in all the time, but I think in the end there was. And I think that's what's really cool to share here. You're seeing some of the costume work, more of the crowds. Again, Thomas can maybe speak to how many face replacements we had overall. I can't remember the number.
Oh, we had a good we had almost 200 face replacements in the end, and an equal number of what we called leg replacements. So remember the two main techniques that we were using was, you know, in scenes with Anthony, we would be going after replacing Anthony's face with Jarrell, and in scenes with Jarrell, obviously we had to, you know, remove his right leg and replace him from the hip on downwards. And it's just because this is important and makes it also different from other, let's say, you know, negative digital prosthetic work, because here it's not there's nothing left. He simply was born without a right leg, and that even shaped his hip bone accordingly, and we reflected that in our model. So you can see that here. You can see that here in the turntable. You know, there is a good amount of bone that's essentially, you know, shaped differently. You know, it looks a little bit shaved off in this relatively extreme turntable, but that was part of the challenge. And you see in the before and after is, you know, you see him wearing a green sock at times. That was mainly there as a reminder for Jarrell. You know, it feels a little different and has a slightly different texture. And it's basically a reminder, hey, this right leg, don't put emphasis on it. Yeah. It's not really useful, even though it's a green screen green, but it's not really useful as a
good point. Good
And,
point, Thomas.
Thomas and Julian, we have a good question here. How did you recreate the footage that the second leg was hiding? What did you do that once you removed the leg and then comped everything back in? Talk us through that process a little bit, because it is a great question.
Yeah, so there's a lot of this is really good old frame by frame paintwork. You know, a lot of the background restoration here, because I mean, obviously, you know, this is all handheld camera, so there's not much you can do in terms of clean plates. We shot photographic clean plates, meaning that's just the background. You know, without anyone occluding, without anyone in front, without anyone in it. So we had that. So the artists had bits and pieces, you know, that they could restore the hidden areas from. But when it comes to his leg, it was twofold. It was you know, in-frame painting, or a complete, you know, we took out huge chunks and then basically recreated his lower body entirely in CG. So that we could get away from having to, you know, doing little itty bitty bits and patches where one leg would occlude, you know, where the right leg would occlude the left leg, or the what are they called again? He's moving on the crutches. You know, in scenes when they're not wrestling, in all the drama scenes, he's mostly on crutches. That's his form of locomotion. And
Thomas, one thing you reminded me of, but one of the processes that you and I were talking about early as we sort of shared work across some multiple teams is that, to your point or to your question, Petra, that was brought up, we kind of like there was old-fashioned, visual effects approaches that have been around for a long time, but there was some smart things that sort of help speed things up. For example, what happened was like a first pass was done pretty quickly, and because as you would I think you would agree, Thomas, like we didn't clean up everything because that would take an insurmountable amount of time. So it was kind of like doing a first pass rough anim with a rough cleanup and then realizing what needed to be done. Because at the end of the day, like as you guys can see here from the breakdown and Thomas pointed out is that because he doesn't have a hip, a lot of the work that I think we might be touching upon as we talk here with Julian is that like the movement is different. When you don't have a hip, the cloth moves differently. So it wasn't just the knee down, or even the quad. Like it was a lot more than that. But just so we can stick to making sure that we all have enough, because I know there's lots to share. I think at this point it's probably a good opportunity to punt it over to Julian. Unless Thomas, did you want to say anything further about this clip?
No, absolutely. Thank you. You took the words right out of my mouth. That's it. Yeah. Let's go to
Awesome.
Julian.
So I'll
All
stop
right.
sharing, Julian, and pass it over to you, my friend.
Yeah, for sure. So I can go over the details about how we managed to come up with that much convincing looking legs here on our CG end. I was involved with pretty much all the CG elements, of course, with this show. So we had this leg replacement work, but we had as well like some set extensions and the gyms, the stadiums to add, as well as like many seats for a crowd setup and doing like the layout and the placement for that. But yeah, for sure, I think what's interesting is how we could manage to make this leg like work here, because it's two main challenges that we realized when we started to work on this. It's as Landon and Thomas was saying, when we look at the shot work, a good amount of paint, of course, custom paint work everywhere, but we had to figure out how much we needed to paint out, and where is the CG leg is gonna merge and blend with that work, because it's all of that section here that we kind of were working on, and we wanted to blend with our model, of course. So we have two important like stuff that we worked on for all of the shot related work. It's like all of the geometry that we have inside of the character that was match moved and everything, and we needed to have something that was as close as possible to the guy here, and we wanted to interpolate also on how we could reshape from the two-legged actor to the single-legged one. So we had to make sure we had the good placement for that, and then we were adding like our cloth simulations here that we can feel like even this section, it was part of the geometry that we had under that, and it needed to work well together, or else if we didn't have the right volume inside of the costume, well, it was really hard to make the cloth sim convincing. So it was really the two like difficult elements that we had to work on. And for most of the shots, we were even considering like a full singlet render here, as well as a masked out version of the leg that we could feather out and blend, keeping like as much of the real actor suit as possible. And that's a good example here for what we needed to look for. Like it's that line here with the suit that we see there. We had a bunch of other different suits and a bigger wardrobe to set up and to work on overall. But yeah, we were trying to do something like soft to transition from the CG cloth simulation that was added and mixed with the real footage. So yeah, it was
Julian, we have a good question here. As you guys have all touched on, our actor Jarrell has 2 legs when he's wearing the wrestling singlets. And of course, when you remove the leg and sim the cloth, that's going to have an effect on what we see in terms of lighting and texture and movement. Do you want to go into any specifics regarding the software that you used throughout some of these steps?
Yes, for sure. We did design the suits here using a Marvelous designer to get like the cloth, and it was a balance of getting like some of the wrinkles and the details on the cloth model, but then we didn't want to have too much so that it would create like more complexity with the simulations. So yeah, we decided to have like at least enough resolution on the asset itself and on our cloth simulations to have some wrinkles happening. But again, if we had to go over that and to add like all these extra wrinkles here, as we can see like on the real suit, well then would have been like an additional challenge. But then again, harder to integrate and to blend if we wanted to keep again as much of the suit from the actor as possible.
Yeah, I think it's important to add here, basically, on a project like this, you run with the basic approach, and then it's matched to, the final quality or the final amount of detail that's been put into every shot is matched to every shot. Like for example, the second shot we have in this reel, the second leg removal shot in this reel, it's slightly out of focus, so we can go a little bit. We can take the detail down on our CG, and in this case, this really helps with the sim times, for example. So some of these shots are flowing through the pipeline much faster than others. The basic approach, however, never really changed. And it should be mentioned that I think we had in total we had about, is it 16 or 19 costumes total, I think, because Crafty team was mainly doing the singlets, and Landon's team at Gneiss was mainly doing all the other clothes, which were a lot. So you have basically every costume change, the street clothes that he's wearing. So there was a lot of modeling and simming, cloth simming going on to match all his outfits basically. And yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so no, I was going to say, Landon, because Crafty Apes handled a lot of the singlets, as you mentioned, Thomas, and then Landon Nice Stuff handled a lot of the jeans and sweatpants. Did you have any different approaches that you took when simming some of that clothing?
I don't know that the approach was different, but perhaps like the final execution of the shots would have been, I mean, like the way we reviewed it, the way we understood the movement obviously is different. I think we're highlighting though that like that because it was different, it needed to be simmed differently. And also like for example, with all the different costume changes, I was seeing if I could pull it up here as I'm talking, that like, you know, jeans move differently than, you know, a cotton pant or a polyester tracksuit. And it's not like you could trick the eye into saying like it wasn't a completely digital character in a sense, right, guys? So we're actually replacing only one leg. So one, there was the aid of, okay, well, there's the cloth beside him. Oh, thank you, Thomas. Moving, but then the other sense is that the challenge was is that like he's literally wearing those same clothes. So, you know, color, texture, movement had to match because, you know, we weren't replacing the entire Anthony Robles in this sense. We were costume on Jarrell, pardon me. So even the shorts, like we had some challenges actually with some of the shorts because some of them were perforated and some of them were less perforated. And again, like I think you trust your gut when you work in visual effects as long as I have and Thomas has and you, Petra and Julian. Like, so if it doesn't feel right, then you start investigating like why does it not feel right? You know, what's not quite matching. And then on other times, like you take advantage of all the tricks up your sleeve. And I think Thomas kind of highlighted it, and that's something that I wanted to talk about in a second, was that like I think the methodology was there for all of these approaches. It wasn't necessarily that it was overall like this groundbreaking thing that no one's ever thought about. It was how it's used and how it's executed, and on a shot by shot basis, meaning that like, you know, you take advantage of everything you can. A depth of field, motion blur plays a huge factor, but like you can't start a shot assuming that you're going to have all of those things to lean on. You start a shot the best way you possibly can, and then when you're adding that polish to take it over the top, you take advantage of sort of the photogrammetry, the photography that was taken upon the DOP's approach, etc. So I think I answered the question, but
You did.
yeah.
I remember one phone call I received from you specifically where you mentioned, you know, there's like 10 different washes of jeans that we have to match to.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
our director, Billy, came, you know, he has worked on some huge visual effects films and is always looking for those details. So your team was trying to get creative with what you could pull from the plate and what you had to recreate and, you know, to show that you could match it 1-to-1. And it's no small feat.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Pedro. So, I mean, in that particular case, we didn't have to like necessarily like change the sim from gene to gene, but obviously the texturing and lighting was a different approach. But I will say that like, you know, rips and genes affect the way they move. And I think again, like if you were replacing everything, it would be different. It might be harder and easier all at the same time. So, again, it was what I think is important to lean on is it was the methodologies and the approach that was, you know, almost standardized from Thomas from the beginning that was carried through the departments and teams to the end.
Yeah, so this way it allowed us, you know, to expand and contract, and also it was what's also very unique about this particular project, and very pleasant actually. It was fantastic to work on, really, because of all the collaboration that was going on from the start. You know, everybody, including I showed you the images from the prep stage. Everyone involved, you know, knew about the complexity to bring this to camera, and so all departments were more so than on other projects. We're really working together and leaning on each other, and this continued through into post. You know, where like everyone involved in post visual effects was talking on a regular basis. You know, we were all sharing, we were all talking. We became really good friends over during this project, to this project and process as well. So it was great in that regard as well. And I think that also makes it to the screen somehow. There's a lot of, you know, this was really crafted by everyone with a lot of love.
I agree. So, and it's a great story. I think that's it's easier to put the extra effort in when you fall in love with the story, so to speak. I think I was going to share some more thoughts, but Julian, did you have anything else that we kind of did we steamroll past anything else that you were going to speak on, or anything you wanted to highlight?
No, I think that was covering like what we had to work on. But yeah, this the show and all of the work we did was really overall a smooth ride, even if we had that much like complexity with the with all of the actors' movement and the integration per shot and all the different costumes. So it went really well. And we also like were moving to that project with Thomas, and we did work on the peripheral before that, replacing limbs. So it was a good practice to work on that just before.
That's
Nice.
right. We had become a crack team of subtractive prosthetic effects, really, and limb replacers. But I wanted to maybe show a little bit of the face replacement workflow that we have in the before and after clip, just so we can
Yeah,
we can
you want me to share what I can scrub to that for you, Thomas, or do you want to pull it up?
that would be great. Thank you. Just that piece. So so what's happening here, just so you have an illustration of when this technique was applied. You know, it's usually in wider shots. We're a little further away from the action, even though we had some really close calls, which worked really well as well. So here, this is from our in-house machine learning team. This was at Crafty, supervised by our ML machine learning supervisor. And what we did, basically, we took thousands of images of Jarell in all sorts of different lighting situations, angles, expressions, and put that all in the hopper. The hopper in this case is a Crafty designed machine learning solution for face replacements. And this, in combination with some very clever compositing tricks, makes for very seamless results in this case. So this was basically this was the second one of the main techniques that were used. Petersonev, our machine learning soup, is mostly responsible for these results. That was very cool. Then we had the last thing to mention, of course, is crowds. Mentioned at a very early beginning, low angle camera in a big venue where you are supposed to see 20,000 people means you have to fill the seats, because you will see those. And this is not boxing. This is very different. Boxing, everything is focused on the boxing ring in the center, and it's heavily spotlit, and everything else falls off into darkness. Not so in wrestling. You may have seen this in the sports clip from the very beginning. The audience is pretty present at all times. So, which is why we went with a sprite-based solution. That means we turned 75 extras into, or background players, I should say, into at times 2,000 or even 15,000, depending on the width of the shot. So again, this is using the geometry that's based on LiDAR scanning from the venues to then place our sprites here. That, again, we have a proprietary software that allows us to actually relight the sprites. And then we had a proprietary compositing setup that allowed us to place them, mix and match them, place them, even change the t-shirt colors, because again, world building, Billy was very important for him that the right college colors are represented in these seating areas.
It's proprietary, Thomas, but how you execute it, but you would say that it's also based off of like these normals passes that you were able to generate.
Exactly. So we were able, that's exactly right. So we were able to relight them because we were able to create normals passes very, very quickly. Which, especially when you're dealing with so many instances, of course, it's important to have a technique that doesn't take days. Mm-hmm. As of course this is visual effects, and there's always revisions and always changes. But yeah, the basic this was the basic workflow. So what you're actually seeing is real people. These are not digital extras. These are actually filmed extras, only very heavily digitally treated to match the environments and to fit into the shots.
Thomas, just because you mentioned time, I know you mentioned you were able to take thousands of photos of both Jarell and Anthony on set, which was really helpful in feeding your machine learning tools. How did that compare time-wise versus building a 3D head and animating it is what one of our questions is from the group here.
Yeah, we had, quite frankly, time-wise, I mean, we had a bit of an enforced longer prep period because our movie actually ran into the actor strike and the combined strikes. So, we used about 6 months of downtime actually to revise our approach a little bit. But in the end, let me put it this way, since we're mostly using face replacements in like non-acting shots, like in non-drama shots, it's definitely much faster than a conventional CG-based head replacement. Some shots, clearly won't lie to you, take this to the extreme. So in these cases, we had to actually create, because we had scans of both Jarrell as well as Anthony. We had to create a head for Jarrell in CG to place over and track over, basically again good old match moving, place over Anthony to then essentially project a machine learning face onto. So there were those edge cases, but most of the time it put us at a major timing advantage.
When you were in prep, did you, because I know you experimented and you started putting tracking markers on, was it at that point, were you still looking into both options? And was there a pivot moment where you decided, you know what, we're not going to do this the traditional way, we're going to lean into some of these new technologies?
Yeah, exactly. That's why there are tracking markers on his face. And a few weeks into then our testing, we walked away from the stage basically, and then did our testing behind the scenes. And a few weeks into that, we were very convinced that we could handle this as a machine learning, or AI task. And then decided to go full on no markers, which was also a request, of course, or really worked well with production. This film was shot on a 31-day normal schedule. This is not a schedule for a visual effects heavy movie. Really, the only separate visual effects day we got was one day on the mountain, running up and down, grabbing extra plates, and the day for the sprite shoots. The rest of it had to happen basically within the confines of what is an independent movie. So anything that would save us a little bit of time was very, very welcome. And this saved time in makeup because we didn't need to apply any marker setup. It saved a lot of time in costumes as well. We didn't have to go with major tracking suits and things like that. So we designed this all for multi-camera and move, basically. Go fast. So visual effects would go in at night, LiDAR scan, take all the plates in the world, try to grab as much as possible. And then when the team came in the morning, it was an onslaught of 4, sometimes 5 cameras, at all times, with very little that visual effects could do other than, grabbing light spheres and things like that.
Awesome. And Landon, I just wanted to give you a minute to speak or answer any questions that might come in as well. Is there anything specific that you wanted to touch on from your experience? I know one thing we mentioned early on was, how lucky we were to be able to support some of the most emotional scenes in the film, and visual effects doesn't always get the opportunity to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Petra. I would say that's a really good point. Like when you watch the film, if you haven't already, like there's some intense scenes with some of his family members, and I think like we really wanted to honor the performance and not distract with any of the visual effects, so that you're not. I think the best visual effects is when you don't see them. They just you're so in love with the story that we're supporting what's happening, and I think that what the foundation that Billy and his team and the story that Artist Equity was crafting, we got to really help and support that. And I've been doing this for a very long time. There's very few scenes like the one I almost don't want to talk about it too much because I want people to see the film that I was really excited to be a part of. Yeah, exactly, because it was just it's intense, it's dynamic, and And I think we did a good job. I think we did a great job. I don't think we pull away from the story at all. But I know we're getting close to the end of time and we want to leave some more time for questions, but I just wanted to bookend some of the things we talked about a little bit before we sort of move into questions, if that's okay, Petra. We didn't necessarily, Petra and I have worked together a lot over the years, but Thomas and I sort of met each other on this show. And I think what really, I mean, maybe it's because of the story, but I think Thomas and I are both, you know, easy to get along with. And so are you, Petra and Julian. But there was a lot of like collaboration throughout this project. And, you know, I think I've met Anthony Rollis. He doesn't have an ego, even though he could, in a sense. And there was none on any of our teams. They were all checked at the door of the gym, so to speak. I think that really contributed to getting the results that we got. And the reason I want to highlight that is that, like, I know this is sort of like a behind the scenes and, like, you know, how was it done and what tool was used and, you know, how did you click on that and why did you choose this? And at the end of the day, I think it's like about coming together and working together as people, and people have different tools and things like that. I was just gonna say, like, you know, we heavily rely on flow tracker from Autodesk, and it's a huge, but not everybody works the same way. But again, we collaborated and came together, and sort of the heavy lifting that we did through post was we were able to do that because we were in step with each other, supporting and finding out exactly someone here.
Happy
teams, better project. I agree. And I think it just
Totally.
doesn't get said enough is what I'm trying to say. And I think that, like, I don't know, you get, like, I've been an artist most of my life, a supervisor for the back, sort of the back third. And as an artist, when you are on a team that you enjoy being a part of, you are willing to, not that you're like, oh, I'm happy today, I'll, you know, work harder. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying that, like, when the vibe is there, strong, creative, collective, it produces better results. And I just think that that's non-software, it's non-denominational, and it just doesn't happen enough. And I think that's what I was inspired by on this show. So I just wanted to say that.
And before you take it over, I know you're itching to do it. I just one thing. So thank you, Landon. Exactly, echoing that. And you know, I knew that we had done our job right because we were talking about having the visual effects completely sinking into the background when after the premiere in Toronto.
That's right.
We're just getting up from our seats, and there were literally people there who, when Jarrell walked on stage, there was an audible gasp from some people. It was like, they were literally surprised that the actor actually had both legs. So we knew that we had done our job right when that happened. As far as you know, supportive visual effects, I think this is the whole. That's the name of the game for us.
Absolutely.
Couldn't agree more. You guys did a fantastic job and really helped bring this story to life.
With your help, you're too humble. You're too humble.
Okay, Kelly, back to you. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all four of you, Landon, Julien, Thomas, and Petra, for joining. But we can get started with Q&A. So before the cameras even come out the Pelican, is there a system to go from camera, director proof shots directly to the cloud to the departments?
Not necessarily. So I think, Thomas, you're saying, like, you know, once the shot is shot, is there a faster? Not necessarily, Kelly. I think most people would be surprised how, you know, old school things are still. I think the question, Thomas, and you can chime in, is like, you know, the shots are shot based off of what the plan would be for the day, and Thomas would go through that with the DOP and the director and sort of, but once it's shot, it still goes to editorial. It still has its time to sort of marinate in editorial but I think that's why it's so important to build that foundation. Yeah. I think that's what they're asking for, Tom. Like, you weren't taking shots directly from camera to match move. No,
you wouldn't do that. Not in this project, because again, you know, the steps are all footage goes to editorial. You know, the editor puts the film together, makes a take selection, an ultimate take selection, and at some point later, when everybody approves of the edit, you know, the resulting visual effects shots, what are now in the film and with their durations that are supposed to have, those then get handed over to the visual effects team. So you know, we call that turnover. And that turnover is not happening until, you know, weeks into most most times until weeks into the editorial process.
Yeah, I will say that it's through a creative process, there is a cost, right? We have budgets and things and time constraints that we're working to. And to answer that question a little bit more specifically, a director might get a shot, but he might have 2 or 3 takes, right? So which take did he choose? We can't do all work on all 3 because it might be. And if thinking about a show like this, if we had 700-800 shots, once they pick their takes, can you imagine if we were doing work on every take? Like it would be it would be that much more work, which that increases the cost. And again, it's definitely a creative constraint that we all deal with as artists and supervisors and creative people in the film industry.
Thomas, do you remember how long pre-production was? I don't think you had very much time to get up to which speaks a lot to your work that you were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say, but basically, I think I got the call with everybody on a Thursday, and the following Tuesday, I was in LA on the prep stage, and we shot a test. And the test was convincing, and then from there, we basically had 3 weeks of prep. So 3 weeks.
That's really quick.
3 weeks to do everything, 3 weeks to get everything organized, 3 weeks to get the scans, to get even to get breakdowns basically done. So it was a very, very short in the lead up. So we had to move quickly throughout the whole process. Yeah.
I think every visual effects supervisor / producer and artist would like more time. We never get enough, and I think everybody understands why. But it's about thinking on your feet. When you say, Thomas, like, what? Okay, I would like this, but so I'm gonna do this instead. I'm gonna gather what I can. I'm gonna and you're always kind of like trying to figure out what's the most important thing. Yeah, 3 weeks ago. Exactly.
No, exactly. This is, it's because it's again, this is the nature of the bit of the nature of the show. It's not, like I mentioned before, this is not a Marvel piece, obviously. It does come with completely different budget restraints and completely different rules because of that. So yes, we would have wished for a lavish 3 months prep just for visual effects, but it was not to be, and we still ended up, I think, with an extremely convincing result. So I think not crying over that. So
we should probably take another question. I was going to add to that, but I'll. Is there any more questions, Kelly?
I think there's one that is something we've also discussed on this show, and it's the importance of collaborating with the costumes department. There's someone that has joined today that is in the costumes department, and their question was the importance of collaborating closely with the different departments. And I think that's a really great point. And some of us came on late to the project, and I don't think some of those important key conversations were able to happen, but it was definitely part of the post-conversation sort of roundtable of okay, what could we have done better? We always like to do a post-mort. And that was one of them of, if we had collaborated more closely with the costumes department, maybe there would have been a few less jeans that Landon had to make up. It would have been a more efficient and cost-effective process for sure. And I totally agree with them. Any department.
Exactly, because at that point, when we came in, basically, thank you for bringing that up, because yes, 3 weeks, with 3 weeks to go, every other department was already set, basically.
Right.
There was really not much to do. I mean, even we managed to get some of the mechanical solutions through. We have a couple of shots in the film where we were able to hide his leg in the mattress, for example. Like good old stage tricks. But of course, that still needs to be prepped. That still needs to be done. It still needs to be rehearsed. So it'll, nothing ever happens from 1 second to the next. It sounds easy and straightforward, but you basically get this process in motion, and maybe a week later you will see a first test with a leg hidden in the mattress, in the real world. Similarly for costumes, in some cases it would have been great, if we had sewn on flaps, to avoid some of the shots, because we could have hidden the fact that there's no leg behind it. But again, it was too late to do that. This fabrication was done, basically. So
I would say. Pardon me, Petra?
No, I was underlining one of your previous points, which was sometimes we get brought in to fix something that was already shot, and this was one of those instances.
Yeah, I think people have to for those that are on this webinar who haven't been on set, or I'm sure the person in the costume department wishes that he or she has more time. When I think when you're a creative person and you're working in to a timeline and a budget and there's constraints, you always you care about your craft. I think most people care about elevating what they do and they want to do the best they can. But sometimes there's just things that are not in your control. And I think that's something to consider. It's an organic process, and also just because you plan everything out, and that's why I think it's so good that the foundations that Thomas had sort of set up from the beginning were there, because then you find out later on, like, oh, that was something that I wish I could have done better. But but you don't always know. You have to be flexible. I mean, and at the end of the day, as visual effects teams, we want to support the story, because we can do all this amazing work, and if the performances are lacking because of X, Y, and Z, or us needing more particular time on one particular shot, it doesn't help the story. And I think that's what it's important that we all remember, that as creatives, that at the end of the day, it's a collective.
If for any Friends fans out there, we're always the ones holding the couch yelling pivot.
Yeah, yes, good point. Good point.
Awesome. Well, this is all the time that we have. I feel like this hour has just zoomed by so quickly. Again, I want to thank you, Petra, Landon, Thomas, and Julien, one, for joining us today and presenting on, the behind the scenes, but also congratulations on the work in the film.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see
so
you
much
all.
for joining.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us.
For having us. Bye.
Bye.